My name's Thea. I'm the founder and director of Menopause at Work, and I've been bringing menopause awareness to workplaces since 2019 in the form of training and coaching and education and policy and strategy support. And these events are specifically designed for in-house workplace professionals to come together and to connect and to learn and to share what we've been up to, so we can learn from each other, but also learn from experts in the field. And that's why the structure of these meetings includes both a presentation from someone with expertise, and I'll introduce Katrina shortly. I guess most of you on the line already know things like when you deliver well-designed wellbeing strategies in the workplace, you get a good return. You know, if it's best practice, it could even be up to $5 for every $1 invested. We know that when you lift the well-being of women's health, you lift the well-being of the whole community, and including in your workplace. And we also know that if you embed menopause support into workplaces, that can absolutely help retain experienced staff and protect the career trajectories of midlife women. We know these things, but your boss doesn't necessarily, nor the person who might be writing out the budget for the next financial year. So the big question is, how can we present our case to our leaders in a way that really makes sense for them and increases the chances that our wonderful project that we've got related to women's health actually gets across the line. And that's why I'm so delighted to be bringing Katrina Johnston today to help us tackle this issue. So welcome, Katrina. Thanks so much for making some time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thea. Always wonderful to collaborate with you, and great to see some familiar names in the chat as well, and looking forward to connecting with more of your network.
Yeah, awesome. So Katrina is the founder and director of Wellness Designs, which is a strategic consultancy, training and support organization for workplaces, for government agencies, and also, industries as well. And the neat thing about Katrina is that, she's got over 28 years of experience in designing and delivering workplace wellbeing strategies. Many of them have been award-winning, and she's done this around the world and across a whole range of different sectors. And I know I've got quite a diverse sectors represented in the registrations today, from health to aged care to retail and transport. The other neat thing about Katrina is she's walked in your shoes. She's been an in-house wellness practitioner, so she knows what it's like. And she's worked for organisations in that role, such as Ramsay Healthcare, Adidas in the UK, Queensland Rail. So she knows what it's like to be at the coalface. But importantly, Katrina is also a great strategist as well. And it's actually your strategic brain that we want to tap into today, Katrina, to help us be a little bit more strategic when it comes to trying to get funding for our women's health project, or, some people might be here for some broader wellbeing project that they're interested in. So thanks so much for offering us a bit of your time. I just wanted to kick off, given that you have been in this space for quite a few decades now, and in fact, you are one of the pioneers in Australia getting workplace wellbeing onto workplace budgets. What kind of changes have you noticed within workplaces around the ease or difficulty of getting wellbeing funded? What are some trends that you've seen?
Great question to start there. And I think, if anything, like our clients, given the past few years, employee wellbeing continues to still be very much front of mind for leaders, grappling with seismic changes to how and where we work, to crippling skills and staff shortages, and also concerning levels, I think, of fatigue and burnout for both our leaders and our teams. Plus, not to mention, the cost of living crisis, the rise of AI, political disparities and extreme weather events, just to name a few challenges there. I think the good news is we're seeing organisations continue to recognise the business imperative for investing in wellbeing to rise to these challenges. However, I think, frustratingly, which will be a topic we'll unpack further today, it's not always translating into more budget spent, for organisations. So some of the trends, I guess, that we're seeing, I think this was reiterated in one of the frustrations from one of our clients recently, where they're saying their leaders are failing to allocate resources and expecting wellness to just happen by magic. It does require that allocation of resources, both human and also budgetary. But certainly trends we've seen probably in the last 18 months to 2 years is maybe where there had been budget allocated for a more holistic wellbeing strategy. It has been redirected into more meeting health and safety obligations, probably a bit more in that reactive sense. But we are seeing that start to swing back now. And just to give you a sense, I think that's going to continue to be a really big appetite for. I actually posted on LinkedIn, some might have seen it last week, a new primer that had been developed by the Australian Institute of Company Directors on governing health and safety, psychosocial risk, and had close to 10,000 views just on that one post, just resharing basically a document. I think it was like 130 likes and a number of shares. So I think people are really hungry still for guidance in that area. I think that will continue, but we are seeing a swing back to more that holistic view that also accounts for the likes of physical well-being, financial well-being, and career well-being, to name a few. So I think that's good to see that rebound. The other thing we're seeing is rather than as a provider, maybe where companies had previously spent on larger maybe consultancy pieces, budgets are tighter. And they often have the expertise in-house, but they're often running wellbeing on the side of the desk. They're, a few people down, and it's just one of the hats that they wear, so to speak. So they're really just looking for that additional, I guess, critique, guidance, expertise, and then they can sort of run with it from there. So we're doing a lot more of that on-demand type support as a provider, more that mentoring where we're doing a desktop review and critique, and then they're on their way. The other thing I would say also is we're seeing again linked to probably not the biggest spend up front where they're needing to do maybe an audit to begin just to get a handle on or a stock take of where they've been investing to date. They're wanting to do it right this time. They're wanting to spend their dedicated and potentially limited funds in the right area where there is a real return. So they are able to get that buy-in to do an initial diagnostic or audit, then with a broader strategy that would then follow with the leaders. The other trend we're seeing is also organisations investing in building capability as well. So previously where they might have sent maybe a representative along to, say, a public training program in which we run through our dedicated academy, now they're actually doing more in-house training where they're actually upskilling a team to be able to take that strategy forward. And I think part of that is that increased awareness and understanding of what wellbeing means for our organisation, so it can be more tailored. They're all then singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, and it's much more sustainable if the wellbeing person, leaves, that the whole thing's not going to fall down. So I think companies are willing to spend more in that area where they're also getting a strategy out of it. So that's another trend. And also I would say in the leadership training as well, we're doing a lot more in that space, again, where leaders I guess saying that they support well-being, but it's what do they really mean by that? So again, it's getting that shared consensus of what well-being is to the organisation, what their role is as leaders, and how they can again be well to lead well themselves, particularly when a lot of the research is showing they're very burnt out as leaders. So that would probably be some trends we're seeing. And probably the only other thing from I guess frustrations from a provider standpoint is we're having often a lot of great conversations with the HR person or the safety leader, and they get it, but it's that ability or I guess know how to be able to sell it up, further to that organisation. So I would encourage those on the call to really work with your provider, and that's where that initial audit or helping together to craft a proposal can be really valuable. So we are collectively tapping into the pain points, getting across the key messages that you want to put forward, but to really ensure it is hitting the mark when it reaches that exec table. And the other trend I think I'd said to you, Thea, as we were briefing for the session, is we're seeing a lot of turnover at the moment through particularly government organisations where you might have established a great rapport with the safety person. It's not just them that have left, but maybe the whole department has turned over. So it's really hard to get that traction. And also, I think the other thing we're seeing is a lot more hoops to go through as far as sign-offs. So whereas before the HR person might have had the designation to be able to just sign it off, now they've got to go through lots of approvals, more around IT, more around cybersecurity is another, and that can all delay some of those approvals as well. So again, I would encourage you to work with your providers and to, flag maybe some of those things up front that could maybe delay things like timeframes, and maybe even look at a time sensitive, incentive or similar, which might again help keep things moving. So that's probably a long answer to your question, Thea, but
That's
that's a bit of a
great.
lay of the land from, I guess, both a provider and probably an in-house perspective at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to tap into your expertise there. And just picking up on two of the things that you said, said the challenge of the workplace wellbeing practitioners know the value. How do we sell it up? And then also when there is high turnover, how can you embed stuff so that it's not all lost when that person goes? So
Yeah.
let's start with that first one, the selling it up. And you've got a lot of experience at this. And in your training courses, this is what you coach people to be able to do themselves. But what are your top tips for really nailing, I guess, the business case when you're pitching, whether it's your program or strategy, to your boss, to the person who holds the strings to your purse?
Yeah, how do we open up those purse strings? So I've got
Yeah,
just
that's
a
what we
couple of
want
slides that I'll just use to
sure.
illustrate that. And just to reiterate too, I think we've moved beyond the, nice to have. I think as to touch on before, it really is being seen as that business imperative. We've got the likes of 87% according to the latest Aon Global Wellbeing Survey of companies in APAC that do have wellbeing initiatives in place. And we have seen a significant jump also with a formal strategy. But I think where there are some more opportunities is around how we best integrate as far as a people's safety and wellbeing strategy. So I think that's where the most opportunity lies. But how do we really open up those purse strings? So hopefully some of these 7 tips will help with that, and for yourselves too, being able to sell it forward. So in our training programs, we talk around firstly, what's keeping your leaders up at night? So what's keeping the C-suite up, so to speak? So it's really tapping into, what are the company's goals? How can a dedicated wellbeing strategy or initiative align to and support the organization's strategic goals? And also we talk about making it personal too. I think we always assume that it's a really rational choice, but often it can be a very emotional decision. So it's being able to get to know your leaders. What are their strengths, their weaknesses, their leadership style, but also what are their passions outside of work to be able to position that. And as the saying goes, people do business with people. So I think often, you find you're halfway there. This is one of the points too that we would normally do an initial scanning exercise with our clients, whether it be at the proposal stage or as part of our audits. And we actually encourage as part of the audits for the HR or safety person to go at that point and do some key stakeholder interviews, including with the likes of the CEO, to get a sense from them to, what does wellbeing mean to them? Do they feel are some of the key health, safety and wellbeing needs? What does the best practice strategy look like to them? And what are some of the outcomes that they might expect? And it's also a great chance just to again explore where there might be some budgetary, opportunities or limitations. So that's often a great logical starting point. And this is just a study that was done again by Mercer Marsh. I'm just going to bring all those up. And they actually surveyed over 200 HR and risk managers in Australia and New Zealand as to what they felt were the top 5 people risks. So again, if we can tie it again to that risk, so rather than being a cost, what's the risk, if we don't invest in this area? And what you can see there is employee health and wellbeing was rated number 2 by those Australian business and HR leaders as far as the likelihood that it could have significant impacts in the next 3 years. So that was based on their risk rating score. And interestingly, employee wellbeing had jumped as a risk from number 10 in the previous survey 2 years before to number 2. And they had put that down to some of the increased onus around that psychological health and safety piece, which I know you'd explored in that last session, Thea, with the wonderful David Savio as well, and the impacts there. So I'd be interested again in the chat if any of those are really ringing true, within your organisation, but certainly they're front of mind in a lot of conversations with our clients. I'm just going to draw on some research also now from ARI, so where they do these regular work outlook reports, if you haven't followed them already. And according to a recent one, 38% of the 600 business and HR leaders that they surveyed, 36% were planning to increase staffing levels. So we are really seeing not only the compliance and particularly around the psychological health and safety as a key business driver, but particularly around that attraction and retention piece at the moment, and how wellbeing serves as part of that broader employee value proposition. So not only to attract and retain staff, but also there's been a lot of research, particularly off the back of the cost of living, to show that a lot of employees at the moment are staying put, even if they're not happy with their employer, with some nervousness around particularly the cost of living. So that's leading to very high levels of disengagement, as a recent Gallup survey found. So it's also about how do we engage the people that are with us. And as you can also see, again, on the top three there on the far right, again, wellbeing, support, flexible working, and also learning and development are the top three retention strategies that, again, companies are looking to. So it's really, I think there are a lot of those are mutually reinforcing, and also smart organisations are addressing those together. So back to our top 7 tips. So the second one is really doing your research. So how much is poor health and wellbeing costing your organisation? So again, it's flipping it from what's this going to cost us to what's the cost if we don't invest? What is the associated risk? And that's where, again, a nice logical step is to do an audit, which is what we do with a lot of our clients. And there are a lot of, free similar tools that are available through the likes of some of the government organisations. So really shifting it from that nice to have to that must have, and really ensuring a data-driven, business case can be put forward for consideration by your leaders. So that might be more a medical-based discussion around some of the risk, potentially tied to things like an ageing workforce. They might be more health and safety driven, the likes of the onus on meeting our obligations around psychological health and safety. It could be around lifestyle, the fact that you have a high percentage of women or men, and some of the wellbeing challenges surrounding that. Or it could be the nature of the workplace, for example, in a blue collar, where you might have higher rates of things like heart attack or slips and trips and falls. So again, it's looking at what some of those levers are within your organisation, and ideally being able to quantify the costs of those, and then even better, being able to couple that with some storytelling as well as to the real impact that that's having, out in the organisation. The third one, we've personally found this, Thea mentioned we've had a lot of experience working on the ground in large roles, working wellbeing managers, for up to 20,000 employees. And this for one was always a really powerful layer, keeping up with the Joneses. So if you can show, what the competitor's doing, and they're investing in a really, comprehensive wellbeing strategy, and they're winning lots of awards and seeing the real benefits, that's going to prick the ears, so to speak, of your senior leaders. And a good way to potentially benchmark as well, linked to that, there's a lot of, as I'm sure you're aware on the call, a lot of industry awards, the likes of the Australian Institute of Health and Safety and Women in Safety, of which we're very fortunate to be a judge and sponsor of the Women in Safety, and even the Global Healthy Workplace Awards through Wolf Kirsten and team. There's been a number of Australian organisations, the likes of Flight Centre, Monash University, Swiss Wellness, who have, won or come runner-up in those awards. And the great thing about that one in particular is you can actually get online and look at their full submissions. So again, it's great to be able to benchmark, particularly to those in your industry, and include some of those things in your proposals as well as to the benefit that they're realising. And also I've just put a note there around recognition schemes as well. So I know here in Queensland, we have the Be Recognised scheme, where you can apply for, at a base, a bronze level, to get some kudos, to get some recognition of some of the work that you're already doing. And that can, again, be a nice bit of PR, positive PR, that can, again, promote that further evolution of your strategy as well with your leaders. So moving then on to our next one, showing the value. So again, that perceived value is really going to depend on what those key drivers are in the first place. And that's where those key stakeholder interviews at the beginning and that desktop audit can be really valuable, and looking at your data and what are some of the risks and associated costs that could potentially propel that business case forward. And this is just a summary of, again, there's a plethora of research to show for each of these drivers. So there might be some that resonate particularly for your organisation. So if you look at the likes of turnover, As an example, we know according to the likes of ARI that for the churn cost, for an employee is 1.8 times that of an employee's wage. So that's looking at your recruitment costs, your onboarding costs, training up someone, getting them up to speed, so to speak. So again, this is where you can do some sums and look and quantifying what that churn cost might be to your organization, if that's something that really is keeping your CEO up at night, and then be able to show some of the potential value on investment in that space. And I just wanted to highlight on the call, if you're not aware already, there's some tremendous research coming out of the University of Oxford Wellbeing Research Centre at the moment. This is a great downloadable guide that has 12 key drivers of workplace wellbeing, and the best thing being all the associated research linked to those drivers. So if you are looking for some data to be able to hang off, so to speak, for your business case, I really encourage you to check it out. It's based on a review of 3,000 academic studies of interventions, proven strategies, and really aiming to bridge that gap between the academic and also the business world. So as an example, if you were looking, say, workplace mental health, came out as a key priority for your organization, you could look at, say, the training costs compared to, say, the average cost of a mental health claim for your organization, and then work out some predictive ROIs of what you could save, in that space. So I think it gives your CFO, your chief financial officers, something more substantial to hang off. We have a saying we use in the training is tell the numbers to the CFO and the stories to the CEO. So again, if you can couple that with some storytelling about the real impact that some of those pain points are having, that's where we find it even more powerful. So certainly we would encourage you to check that out. And another way too, which can be more palatable, is maybe just starting with an initial pilot. And certainly in the in-house programs in which we've been involved and strategies, often that's easier to digest, for your stakeholders. And it's actually a smart way to do it regardless, because you can test the model, test the initiative, the Women's Health Initiative that you might be looking at with a smaller subset group, refine, review, measure the impact of that before you roll it out holus bolus across the organization, and then hopefully get that further budgetary ask as well. So our next step is really then developing that targeted strategy. So again, in the training programs we run, we talk about the importance of doing that needs assessment, doing it really well, determining what are not only the employee health and wellbeing needs, but also for the organization, what are the associated risks, to then guide the priorities for your wellbeing strategy to ensure a really targeted and cost-effective strategy, ideally with really clear measures of success. And when we're doing the planning phase with our clients, what we also look to is also some quick wins, some low-hanging fruit where we can get some momentum. So that can often be really good, again, for the decision makers to see that there's that activity happening whilst you work on some of the, bigger ticket items, if you call it that. So again, that data-driven approach, looking at quality, not quantity, doing a few things and doing them really well. And we often get the comment that, there's a lot of these free initiatives that we can run, but I think it's also remembering a lot of those free initiatives can sometimes take a lot of time and man hours, to undertake as well. So to be really considered and selective, aligned to your needs. The other thing that we do with our clients, and again, when we're doing the consultancy piece, is also looking at opportunities to, piggyback off other things that are already happening, really looking to that well-being by stealth. So it might be that the learning and development team are in the process of refreshing the leadership training or the onboarding program for recruitment. And are there ways that we can embed well-being into that? So that way you're not always having to rely on your own budgets. That sense of shared responsibility as well, and that could even extend to things like cluster-based programs. I know Thea, we've done a bit of that type of work over, and some of our associates where you might, tag team with another SME, another small business where you might pool the costs, say, to bring in a consultant to help you with a strategy, as an example. Making those healthy choices the easy choices, again, that's always a focus of the work that we do with clients, and whether that be through things like healthy policy, healthy work design, and the actual physical workplace itself. So I know the likes of the Queensland government have the reproductive leave that they've recently introduced, and just looking at opportunities to integrate wellbeing into BAU. And again, to really ensure that best bang for your buck. I just wanted to share, for those that haven't seen this, we're finding this a really valuable model to share with our clients. It's building upon a lot of the pioneering work that was done by Dr. Angela Martin, one of our expert faculty, along with Anthony Lamontagne, 10 years ago, around that integrated approach to mental health at work. But it's recently been updated to include some other related models, including smart work design, drawing on some of Professor Sharon Parker's work. But I thought what it shows is really that integrated approach, and that's where we're seeing a lot of clients struggle at the moment, where they might have a wellbeing strategy traditionally here, and now they've got sort of increased onus on things like psych health and safety and other related, whether it be diversity or other genders, and how we integrate that all together. So whilst it's called a mentally healthy workplace framework, I think it's got the opportunity to look at it more broadly as to how you approach health, safety, and wellbeing, particularly starting from that systems level, through to more that individual centric approach. So it's going to be much more sustainable. It's going to be much more impactful. And again, it's shifting more to that well-being by stealth, from promotion through to more that reactive response mode. So again, you've got the reference there if you're interested, but I would really encourage you to check that out. And I think, again, our last two tips, I think being realistic as well. I think with the leaders, we need to really manage those expectations up front. And again, there's a plethora of research to show that you're really looking at a 3+ year investment in targeted and holistic wellbeing strategy to really move the needle, so to speak, on some of those harder measures. So the likes of sickness-related absenteeism, workers' compensation costs, and the like, you're not going to see those shifts overnight. And certainly in our experience working in-house, that was about the tipping point where we were starting to see some real traction as part of, again, that coordinated and collaborative approach. Not to say that there can't be immediate gains, within a 12-month, but more at that process level, more at that impact level, where people are feeling, they enjoyed the session that they came along to. They're feeling more confident off the back, or we've seen an improvement in things like team morale, as an example. So certainly still important to measure and track some of those shorter term measures as well, but being realistic with leaders that it is going to take time to see that shift and that ongoing continuous improvement as well. There's a saying, but when I was at the Women in Safety Awards, they talked about failing forward, and I love that analogy, and not being, afraid to say, well, we tried this, it didn't work, so we're going to again shift tact and try it this way next time. And that's the benefit of that pilot approach as well. You can test and refine. And then finally, and again, we talk about this a lot in our training, about helping leaders understand their role as well. And a lot of it is around that education piece. And we talk about the 4 E's in our training around enabling leaders through providing them with the resources, the funding, building their capability and understanding of what a best practice wellbeing strategy looks like. And it is going to require some level of investment, and looking at it more from a risk perspective rather than a fluffy initiative. Embedding it into the day-to-day. So we speak about embedding it into that business as usual, embedding it into the leaders' job descriptions, into their KPIs, into the likes of policy. So making them more accountable around that. We talk about how we can engage leaders and the role they play, in day-to-day conversations in building that wellbeing culture in organisations. And also for yourselves on the call, it's a bit of that washover effect, keeping them updated on, like I mentioned, that board and leadership executive primer before, have you seen, this new publication that's out? Thought you might be interested in that. And embodying through the role modelling and self-care. And again, particularly given where we are now, after the past few years, leaders need to be well to lead well themselves. And again, I know Audrey McGibbon, one of our faculty, has done a lot of work in this space, looking at, again, the wellbeing shadow that leaders cast also in their organisation. So Thea, that's I guess some tips we hope will prove valuable and practical in really positioning that business case and the business imperative, within your organisation. And as I mentioned before, really encourage you to, work closely with your providers as well to collectively really come up with that strongest possible proposal.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Katrina. Do you mind just flicking back where you've got the 7 all listed in one? Because I just wanted to make a few comments to make it kind of relevant to the women's health scene in particular. So the what's keeping leaders up at night, you had the recruitment and retention were up there for leaders. And you can absolutely make a good case there between women's health. I mean, menopause is my specialty, but endometriosis and retaining staff. And also attracting staff. So that could be a particularly good hook. I love the idea of the stakeholder interviews rather than trying to guess what your leaders are thinking about this stuff, actually getting in there. I can vouch for the value of keeping up with the Joneses. I know some of the law firms that I work with, they will absolutely want to know what are the other law firms doing. And that sometimes alone is enough to entice them. So definitely collect your social proof. You mentioned, showing the value of this, and you also mentioned the value of a pilot. And so I would really encourage that, because what we have to recognize is sometimes our menopause or menstruation or endometriosis projects, they're breaking new ground, and it's not like there's decades of data there that we can draw on. So you can say, hey, let's pilot this, but make sure you have good evaluation questions that aren't just health related, but are business related. So for example, with the Orca Effect program, I've got a question in there, and I can now say this program doubles the number of women who feel they can remain successful in their role. And that has been a very powerful, data point for selling it back. And also just lastly, when you mentioned leaders, equipping them to understand their role. And I think there's a really important role for just educating leaders as well, so they understand the issue, because menopause in particular has been so taboo for so long, it's been quite hidden. So there's so much there that we could, take away and work with. Thank you for that. But I loved your tell the numbers to the CFO, tell the story to the CEO. And perhaps just that's my final point. If you haven't got hard data to demonstrate the value, tell the stories, talk to your people. And once you start doing this work, you will collect lovely stories about how much difference this can make. Now, you had a wonderful title, next slide, Katrina, where you we're going to talk about perhaps some pockets of money that we hadn't thought about before. I mean, we always think about getting it from standard, pots of money. Can you just give a few examples of where else people could actually look for a bit of money if they're struggling to get it from their normal sources?
Yes, no, thanks, Thea. And I think too, this is probably more as I'll say supplementary. So you don't want to be relying on this funding, for your wellbeing strategy. Obviously, the preference is to demonstrate the business case, get that sustainable, investment that ideally would grow over time. But this can help extend, that wellness dollar even further. So we have seen a lot of changes in the funding landscape for workplace wellbeing over the last decade. So previous research undertaken by Bupa 10 years ago, just to put in context, a third of companies were using external funding, to extend their wellbeing dollars. And there were, you might remember, a lot of government grants across Australia as part of the National Partnership Agreement on Preventative Health, and also through other learning developments such as the Mature Workers Upskilling Fund. Up until last year, you could access funding to, including around wellbeing for your mature workforce, which was 40 plus, they classified that as. But sadly, a lot of those things have now dried up. But there are still some little pockets that I just wanted to talk to, as Thea mentioned, some of our clients tap into. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to chat with your health insurers. Some of them have wellness pools or similar, depending on the nature of the corporate health arrangement that you have with them, that you can again put towards potentially a wellbeing initiative or pilot, or even using some of their services. So that's always really valuable. Also, the EAP is another example of that so it's good. Often we underutilize a lot of the other ancillary services that you can, tap into through groups such as that. Landlords as well, sometimes too, they might be prepared to fund refurbishment around more healthy workplace design if it's linked to employee energy management incentives. So that's certainly worth a conversation. We're finding quite a few clients at the moment fund consultancy and other projects through risk management funding if they're self-insured. So again, that would be something worth exploring if you can show how investing in prevention is going to, save some claims down the line. That's certainly, again, worthwhile. Strategic partnerships, I've certainly leveraged a lot of those in previous internal roles where, you might provide a rent-free space in-house where, again, a provider can come in and provide on-site physio or other ancillary services, subsidized for your people. So that's a good example of a win-win scenario, or it might be negotiating discounted rates with your local recreational facilities. A lot of local government have some great free programs, particularly here in Queensland. Government agencies and local councils I'd meant to here. The Grants Finder, Grants Queensland, sometimes there can be some pools of money that you can tap into for workplace-based initiatives such as sun safety and other wellbeing initiatives. In Victoria, WorkSafe Victoria, they have the WorkWell mental health industry trial grants that are open at the moment. So it's more that consortium or industry-based approach for the likes of healthcare and construction are two industries that's targeting. So I would again recommend that you have a look at that grant. There might be an opportunity to piggyback off that. One of our wonderful faculty and partners, Transitioning Well, they offer free workplace mental health coaching through the New South Wales government for small business owners as well. So that can be great to upskill the small business owner, again, around workplace mental health. That's a great free service. And a lot of other government agencies also provide advisory services as well through their healthy worker teams, so including in South Australia. In Queensland, it's through the Injury Prevention and Management Advisory, but it does include wellbeing as an element of that. So there are some good, advisory services that, again, are free. And there's also a host of preventative health programs. Some of them are a bit of an offshoot from the National Partnership Agreement. The likes of My Health for Life is an example of that, which is targeting, it's a triage-based program where they're targeting high-risk employees within your organisation, and it opens up a lifestyle-based support program, including health checks, where they might be at high risk for heart disease or chronic disease. So they were just a couple that I wanted to make mention of. And sorry, the other one was industry-driven groups. So Steering Minds is one. An example of that where the trucking industry have come together to create the Steering Minds program where you can tap into subsidised mental health first aid training and the like. And the final one I just wanted to mention was universities. I leveraged them a lot in previous corporate roles, not only for practicum students, often a lot of fourth year, the likes of human movement and dietetics and others, have a 12-week practicum full time that they need to complete. And we used to have a couple at a time. You could have a nice defined project for them to work on, completed at a level that you would never have had the time for, or at a rigor for. So that can be a great way, once you sort of have a sense of what your plan is, to help with some of that grunt work. And we've also partnered with a lot of the public health sections of the universities with the health statisticians and the like to help with some evaluation of projects as well. So if that's not your strength, don't be afraid to reach out to the universities. They're normally very happy to look at real life examples in organisations to test on. So there were just a few that, if you haven't already, just some practical conversations or buckets of money that you might be able to tap into just to, again, extend that dollar further.
Yes, awesome. And yeah, you mentioned about, health funds, health insurance funds. So I'm an approved provider for Medibank Private. So if any of you wanted to get me in, go and check what your agreement is. They have different levels. And who knows, you could have a little health and wellbeing slush fund there that you never knew existed. And another thing popped in my mind, which I can't remember at the moment. Oh, I think you mentioned, did you also, some workplaces, each individual will have a personal individual professional development training fund, which they might be able to use to participate in some program as well.
Yeah, that's right. And that can be pooled, as a group. So we're doing a lot of that at the moment, more group-based training. So that's good because they get that peer support as well with their colleagues. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think, the main thing I've learned around this is just taking the time to join the dots with whatever is hot, right now. So psychosocial risks are hot. So demonstrate how not creating a female-friendly workplace is going to, create a psychosocial risk around things like lack of support. Like most people in the workplace will say, no, I don't feel supported by my manager around menstruation or menopause, or discrimination and harassment. There's a lot of joke cracking that still happens in this space. So do the work to demonstrate how it's absolutely relevant to one of their top obligations. Yeah. But look, let's open it up now to see if anyone's got any comments or questions or experiences that they would like to share.
Is there a question about audit tools there from?
Yeah. But because you did mention, well, let's just audit what you're doing already, and you've got a great audit tool, haven't you?
Yes, we have. Yes, so certainly on our website, and now we've got an organisational wellbeing audit. That's very cost effective. It's a nice logical starting point for a lot of organisations, and then they might go on to then develop a strategy or often do that themselves.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of the government agencies, so Workplace Health and Safety Queensland, I know the Tasmanian government and other, have a lot of free audit tools too that you can download and undertake yourself in-house. So yes, I would certainly, I'll put a few of those in the chat before the end of the session. Yeah. I think we were talking to just starting the conversation. I think was something Elliot mentioned about, even having a male, how they're supporting their partner, and that use of storytelling, I guess, is a leverage tool. The other thing I failed to mention earlier, we've got a number of clients at the moment where there might be an enforceable undertaking too. So again, using that as a leverage point or EB or otherwise to piggyback off. So, but no, there are a couple of things.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, I heard some of you getting right down to the tin tacks of getting the menopause stuff happening, and that question about how to start the conversation often comes up. Really simple approach is, the days, they do work as an effective hook. It's World Menopause Day on October the 18th, or it's there's a new one now, Menopause and Work Day on September the 7th, or it's Women's Health Week, the first week of September. It's so simple, but it kind of works. And that can be the reason to run the all-staff webinar, and you get a chance to gauge interest, and you can link out to a little survey that takes a pulse. So that's an easy way to start it off. People are also talking about that tricky balancing act between how do you normalize conversations while recognizing not everyone is going to want to do that. So you want to respect personal boundaries. And that's where I think the manager training is really important, because it really drums home that message. It is not your role to diagnose or run around saying, are you menopausal? But you create a team environment where it's safe to talk about this. We do start talking about it in a third person sense, that if any individual wants to raise it, then they can. So there are some nuances that are important, I think, to get right pretty much. Yeah. Well, I'll just share a slide now to let you know where you can go if you do want to follow up and get some help from Katrina. So Katrina's contact details are here. And Katrina, do you want to just give a brief overview of the examples of the ways that you might be able to help someone working up their strategy to try and get it funded?
Yeah, no, thank you, Thea. So essentially we're a boutique workplace wellbeing. So we provide that end to end. So from the consultancy and mentoring, if you're wanting a bit more of that guiding hand, through to our dedicated training academy, where we have training for leaders, practitioners, so those often who are crafting the wellbeing strategy in-house, and also champions training, where you might have multiple sites to really nurture wellbeing at the grassroots level. And then we also have our hub, which is our knowledge centre and community, with over 950 tools, including the likes of audit tools and things that you can tap into. So yeah, we sort of meet you where you are depending on your journey.
Yeah. And one of your services is doing an audit, isn't it, of everything you're spending on wellbeing, and trying to look for some greater efficiencies or freeing up some money on stuff that maybe isn't so effective. Is that right?
That's right. So a bit of that stock take, just to then help you to position that business case as far as that next logical step and how we take it to the next level. So we're doing a lot of that at the moment. So I've just put that in the chat. If anyone's interested in exploring that in more detail, you can book a free discovery call. Happy to go into how we could best support you.
Yeah, awesome. And equally, I'm happy to chat to anyone about any of their issues or challenges related to getting menopause or women's health on the agenda, whether that is a bit of mentoring, like Katrina mentioned. I also have an audit to help workplaces look at what they've already got in place organisationally that can support menopause, and maybe what some gaps might be, as well as manager training and strategy support also. So very happy to chat anytime if you'd like to follow through.